Hello. So it's been a minute since I've released a podcast. Turns out it is as much work as people say, especially as a one-woman show. But I want to release today's for a couple reasons, and it's a very personal story of mine. First of all, I'm talking today to my sister-in-law, Morgan, my brother's wife. And real quick, logistically, the sound got messed up. I tried to fix it as best I could. I thought about re-recording, but she was so strong in what she was saying that I just want to bring it to you guys as she talked about it the first time she's ever talked about it publicly. But I did want to make a note about sound. So I think it is listenable. You can hear everything. It's just not ideal. So putting that note out there now. Second of all, because we recorded this about 2 months ago, probably, I think it's actually very timely to release it now, because at the federal level, we are seeing government officials in the House making massive cuts to things like SNAP and Medicaid. And Morgan is on here to tell their story about using Medicaid when they never thought they would for my nephew Jaxon after a very serious and rare diagnosis. I think there's a lot of stigma that comes along with Medicaid, not by coincidence. I think the right has worked very hard to put a negative connotation on quote unquote welfare. But the fact of the matter is that Medicaid is a very well-functioning, reliable public health insurance system that serves millions of American and many, many children. It is not just for low-income families, although that is a very beneficial piece of it. It is for children with disabilities, for elderly people, pregnant women. There are so many stories of Medicaid, and if you are not familiar with one, it's probably just because you are not aware of the details, but I guarantee that somebody in your life, and probably somebody you love, has utilized Medicaid, and it has been a lifeline for them. So Morgan is going to join today to talk about their son, my nephew Jaxon. They never thought, like I said, that they would need to utilize Medicaid. Both her and my brother work. They've always worked. They enjoy that. And they were doing okay as a dual income household. But when their first son, just after he turned a year old, started having seizures, they got a diagnosis that he had hemimegaencephaly, which is a very, very rare thing where one hemisphere of his brain was larger than the other. So they went through about a year of hell and decisions and conversations and coverage and just trying to navigate all of that. But he was able to receive rare, complicated brain surgery and be placed in intensive therapy thanks to Medicaid. Because of that, he just turned 4. He runs around. He laughs. He kicks a soccer ball. He plays with his sister. He plays with his friends. He's now speaking more than ever, all with half of a working brain. This is possible only because of Medicaid, even though they also had private insurance. So this is a story in my life, but one that I think many people will find hope in and hear similarities with your own lives and your own loved ones. Please call your federal reps and tell them to protect Medicaid. For many families like Morgan's, many kids like Jaxon, and so many other loved ones who rely desperately on access to healthcare. Here's Morgan.
All right. I'm a little nervous.
Don't be nervous. These are like the stories that need to be told. Okay, so today on the podcast, I have a very special guest. It's actually my sister-in-law, Morgan. My nephew, Jaxon, Morgan's son, has been through something that has put them into many challenges in life and also into the whole system of complex medical and insurance questions and situations. And I thought I would have her on today to talk a little bit about their story and Jaxon's story and how this is impacting their family. Hi, welcome, Morgan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about Jaxon and his story.
All right. Well, so Jackson's almost 4. My husband and I, we were trying to get pregnant and struggled for about a year, was able to get pregnant. He went full term. We had a great first healthy 6 months and then started dropping off the development charts. By 8 months, he wasn't able to sit up. So that was actually about the time when I was getting concerned. He started having seizures a little after he was 1 year old, and we took him to the ER, and they did a quick MRI, and it showed that the right hemisphere of his brain was enlarged, meaning that one cell went crazy in utero and just kind of kept growing and like did not stay in its actual space. That brain part actually stopped growing, but because it is grown differently, the connections were off. We treated him for infantile spasms with ACTH. That helped with the spasms for about a year, but he was still having myoclonic seizures, so we were chasing those. Jackson's little spasms and like his infantile spasms, they were quick. So not like those full-blown seizures. A lot of kids with hemimegaencephaly, they usually start seizing in the womb or like right after birth. So after that, insurance and the hospital wanted us to fail 2 seizure meds.
His problem was like a structural issue, right? Which is different than more the typical epilepsy type conditions, right? And even though the doctor knew you'd probably need to do something else, insurance makes you fail a couple of drugs. So tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, that process, it was hard because I come from like a medical background. My parents are in the medical field and I worked in radiology. Because it's a structural problem, it's not typically considered epilepsy, but they know where the seizures are coming from. So it's a double-edged sword. There's so many kids that have epilepsy and they have no idea where the seizures are coming from, and they fail 13, 20 meds. Like there's so many meds, but because they don't know where they're coming from, or it's so complicated that if it's in an area like by the brainstem, they just can't get to that. ACTH was the first medication, so that treated the infantile spasms, and that lasted about a year. And on the EEG, our neurologist started to see the background activity of the hypsarrhythmia, which is the pattern that they see for infantile spasms, was coming back. And infantile spasms, for anyone who doesn't know, they are very detriment to the brain. They will stop the child's progress. Like we could tell sometimes when he would have some clusters that he would regress in any of his development. They're probably the worst type of seizure out there.
So the type of seizures he was having are actually causing damage to the brain, which also makes it, has a sense of urgency. You're kind of in a race to get those under control, right? At a time when so much brain development is happening in those first couple years, right?
Yeah. Those first 3 years are so crucial that lays out the entire foundation. So when Ben and I found out about the diagnosis, I knew that we would probably have to do surgery. We always hoped we're not. Once we got the seizures under control, like he seemed to be doing good. And ironically, that was actually the time that we went in for another EEG, and that was when she called us and she said she had to take the weekend to review it, and then we talked on Monday, and that's how she was able to look back on all these EEGs that we had done in the past, because every time he would have just like a little spasm, we would drop everything and rush to the ER, connect him up to the EEG in the hopes to capture that seizure, to know what kind of seizure it is. And we did that for about a year, being on pins and needles, because he'd go for a couple weeks without any that like I could visually see, and then one day he would have 3, and then they would just stop. And so like by the time you get down there and get them hooked up, they're gone. And so it was a very rocky place to be, especially with work. And on top of our whole story, like we did find out that we were pregnant with our daughter around the same time Jackson got diagnosed. So I had to keep my job. It was a lot of stress, and Jackson had to go to daycare.
That time period when you, had to be working, had to be pregnant, have to drop him and take him, and then, come home, get everybody to bed, and then probably researching more until like the wee hours of the night. And I remember that time obviously being incredibly difficult for you guys, just all of the unknowns. And then you did realize eventually that he was going to need brain surgery, right?
If one side of the brain is seizing, especially if it's like the whole area, it can teach the other side. And so the sooner to do surgery, the better, because the more seizures they're having, the more damage it's doing to the brain.
It's not a little brain surgery.
Yeah, it's pretty big. So a hemispherotomy, back in the day when they first started doing this, they would actually take out the entire hemisphere. Orectomy is Latin for remove.
Remove half, like one whole hemisphere of the brain or half of the brain. Okay.
They would take the actual tissue of the brain out, and then the kids would be left with just space. They found out that there's 4 different areas of the brain. They can go in microscopically and just disconnect. And so then the whole hemisphere, the whole like blood flow and everything stays in there. It's still seizing, but it's disconnected from the body.
So they went in and like completely disconnected, turned off half of his brain, the problem hemisphere, right?
Yeah. So with here's the problems with Medicaid. We were able to have a little bit of time. We were able to get them under control. And yes, the hips arrhythmia was coming back, but we already had like a year of this. So, the minute they said surgery, we started getting second opinions. We talked to surgeons from California, Chicago, and Philadelphia. Medicaid does not cross state lines. If we only had Medicaid, we would have had to stay in Colorado. And the surgeon in Colorado, because it's such a rare diagnosis, and it's even a more rare surgery, the surgeon in Colorado had only done 9. And they were 9 total in the last 6 years.
When he was diagnosed and you were going through this and you were talking to surgeons, you were still on private insurance for him at that point, which is why you were able to, because this is so rare, talk to like world-class surgeons who specialize in this from around the country, right? And if somebody had only had access to Medicaid at that point, that wouldn't have even been an option.
Exactly. And like, who wants to have a surgeon who's only done it 9 times to your kid? Yeah. I'm sure they're talented in other ways, but this is a very complex surgery, and only there's a handful of surgeons that really know how to do it. We were originally going to go to California. Randomly, Ben had met another family whose son had just had a hemispherotomy. The universe just lined us up, and they were great. They ended up going to Chicago, and that's when we found out that surgeons had different techniques. Our other biggest problem was Jaxon had just learned how to walk. He was 2.5 years old. California did not offer rehab. They wanted us to fly home and do rehab in Colorado. The thought of flying with your 2.5-year-old who just had massive brain surgery terrified me.
You can't decouple those, right? It's like you don't have brain surgery without rehab.
Yes. Yeah. Rehab was huge. And luckily, Philadelphia had a rehab unit connected, and the surgeon was able to he does rounds with any of the kids that are in the rehab.
So you guys ended up going to, you said CHOP, which I think is Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, right?
Correct.
For the surgery, and then intense inpatient therapy for, what was it, like 6 weeks?
His therapy was 6 weeks. We were there about 8 weeks total.
How long was the surgery?
So the surgery itself, we checked in at 7 in the morning. They took Jaxon about 7:30. It went until about 10:30 at night.
Wow.
Dr. Kennedy, when we asked, we were like, how long are you going to be in there? He's like, as long as it takes. Each brain is different. It gets to a point where nobody can exactly tell you.
That's such an interesting point for like just medicine in general. Everybody is so different, especially like the brain is a great example of that. It's hard to like regulate it and put these boxes and terms in it when what he said to you, a very anxious mom, about to put your little toddler into massive brain surgery, and him saying whatever it takes. Everybody deserves to hear that. Every mom should be able to hear that when there's something wrong with their child and they're going to somebody who's going to save their life. So shout out to Dr. Kennedy. We love him, right?
Yeah, we do.
So he went through this very long, intense surgery and then this long, intense stay immediately afterwards. But then even when you went home, like what some people may not realize about things that come up in kids' lives like this is that like the surgery was not the end. The surgery was almost just the beginning for you guys, even though obviously you dealt with years of back and forth and questions about what was best. Once you made that decision to do surgery, it's massive brain surgery. And so he's going to be in intense different therapies for a long time, right? What were kind of the conversations you were having as you were starting to look at what your life looked like when you guys did come home?
Yeah, that's a great question. So usually when you have surgery, you go back into, depending on how bad it is or intense it is, ICU, or you go into the recovery. then inpatient therapy phase. And then when you get discharged from the hospital, you go into an outpatient intensive therapy phase. To get home from Philly, they won't release you until they know that you have a therapist lined up. And luckily, our rehab doctor was able to set us up with their outpatient program at Children's Hospital Colorado called Bridge. We were lucky and they discharged us on like 2 days before Christmas. So we got to come home on Christmas Eve. And he had like a week off, and then we just jumped right into therapy of PT, OT, and speech, 3 hours a day, 3 days a week.
By the way, just a reminder, because they turned off a hemisphere of his brain, he only has a one working hemisphere. And so that is why all of these therapies are so important. They, along with his own like internal miracle body, are teaching his brain how to rewire itself and to gain control of the other side of his body again, and how to do things with only half of his brain.
Yeah. When you think about, like, if I rewind 4 years ago, the only treatment for this was taking out or disconnecting half of their brain. That sounds crazy. It sounds like your child has no future. But the idea is our brains are plastic, and the younger you do it, it allows the left side, for my purposes, the left side to take over the functions of the right side. So the right side controls the left side of the body. Eventually, the brain is smart enough that it will build new neural connections, and then the left side will take over.
I think he was taking steps before you guys even left the hospital, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And
yeah,
he's now almost 4. And tell us what he's doing.
Okay, well, so before surgery, he wouldn't really respond to his name, maybe here and there. He made eye contact. He was social. Wasn't really doing a lot of the typical things, kind of like more really big emotions, really big meltdowns. And once the seizure stopped, I think it was maybe a week, actually. I remember him just like mimicking. And that was the first time I was like, oh my gosh. You know, when you're teaching your kid how to do anything, it's all mimic. It's all observation. It's all like you're showing them. And when they don't mimic you back, when they don't do those things, you really can't get anywhere.
That was one of the first big milestones you noticed post-surgery that made you think, oh my God, okay, his like things are opening up for him.
Yes. There was about 3 things where I was like, oh my. It was first he was mimicking. The second one, we put on one of his favorite Disney movies, and he started singing. Like, he wasn't singing the actual words or anything, but singing so many verbalizations that we've never heard. That was amazing. And then he said hi. He said hi within 2 weeks of that surgery. That was his first word ever. And like everybody at the hospital got a lot of highs, but it was just so beautiful. And then it was like, oh my gosh, how much that right side of that hemisphere was interfering with him and his development.
I mean, no, I get new updates every time I talk to my mom too, and every time I see you guys, it's just, I mean, he's running around like crazy with my kids too. I mean, and he's talking more and more, right?
Yep, he's talking like 3-word sentences. He can say mom and dad. He's walking up the stairs. Left arm is probably the hardest part to recover. The other thing with a hemispherectomy or hemispherotomy is because you're disconnecting the hemispheres, you do lose your vision because they have to disconnect that occipital lobe. And so that, to me, for me personally, for our lives right now, is the hardest thing because he is blind in the left side of each eye. So it's not just...
It's the left side of each eye. It's not one eye. And it's so it's like that peripheral... Yeah. That's why Hadley comes around, sneaks around, and gets what she needs because she knows.
Yeah.
This is why you're going to have such a long road to recovery, right? Like, not only is it constant trying to help him kind of learn these things that are harder for him than people who haven't been through his situation, but also because there's not a ton of data on this. I'm assuming it's just, you know, there's a little bit of trial and error to what they're doing, but they have to see him as much as possible. So then let's talk a little bit about like how your life has changed since then, because he's in a lot of therapy. And you and Ben were both working full time before all of this, and continuing on that life was not even a remote possibility in order to care for him the way he needs to be cared for, right?
My life has turned upside down completely. I was working full time. Once they said he needed surgery, I tried to take out FMLA, but I couldn't because I had Hadley the previous year, 2022, in November. The thing with FMLA is you kind of assume it's like once a year, once every calendar year, but no, it's actually whenever you take it out from the time you go back to work, you start earning those FMLA hours again. By the time October came around, I didn't even have the option to take it out because it was still within the 12-month calendar, but I also hadn't earned enough hours for FMLA either. And
because
that's
you
where
got on maternity leave, then when you had to fly across country for your son to have major brain surgery, you couldn't take any leave because you just weren't eligible.
And I mean, my department at the hospital that I work for, they were awesome. Everybody was extremely supportive, but their hands are tied. They allowed me to take a personal leave, no pay. The other thing is, like, if I want to keep my insurance, I just have to pay them the monthly fee. I ended up taking that, but dropping their insurance and just going on Ben's. And me to go on Ben's from my insurance cost us another $300 a month. And so that was why I was always on my own insurance, because it was cheaper.
Mm-hmm. So then when you got home and started doing therapy, you were able to, and this is where it started, I'm sure this was all new to you though, but you were able to enroll Jaxon in Medicaid, right?
Yes. Ben and I are hard workers. We're double income, full-time jobs. We just wanted to have a family. We just wanted to have a kid. We had a beautiful first 6 months of that little baby, and then it was a lot of worry. And my journey to Medicaid was a little bit more difficult. So I was able to get on Medicaid through it. It was called a special needs connection. There's groups send in your application for you, and you just have to fill out the basics. That was so streamlined. They were so great. They are now dissolved because laws have changed. Once you get on Medicaid, especially if you get in-home support services, then you sign up with like another branch. And that's where they either train you as a CNA, or if you're in my case in Colorado, Jaxon got on the children's home and community-based services waiver, long-term care, because he's so medically fragile. With the nursing shortage, they had implemented in-home support services, IHSS, and that allows me to get paid to take care of Jaxon instead of us paying a nurse. The therapy in our lives has cost us a ton. Their equipment, the shoes, everything. And luckily, Medicaid has helped us stay above water. Medicaid actually, for me, has actually kept me able to potentially go back to my job. And here's why. It's because right now, getting paid by the state to stay home and take care of him, I'm able to stay on the hospital as PRN, so I can pick up shifts on the hours I'm not working for Jaxon. So usually it's overnights. But that allows me to at least pay into taxes, pay into keep my job, keep my license up. So as Jaxon gets better and gains more skills, my hours for Jaxon are going to drop. Like, the more he's able to do, the less I get paid. And then I can just easily transition back. If they take it away, then we'll have to pull Hadley out of school. I will fully quit and probably just not keep up with my license because I'll have no idea where our income's going to drop, and we will eventually probably start losing money being able to pay the mortgage.
Yeah, so I mean, the Medicaid is allowing you to just get by and get him the care he needs to get better, give you the opportunity to help him and take him and still contribute to your family. And what you said, it's giving you the opportunity to do this the right way that's in the best interest of your son and everybody else, so you can go back to work and continue contributing to the society. You're not just like collecting a paycheck from the government. That's not what this is.
I know. And I was nervous about staying at home because for me personally, I just never visioned myself as a stay-at-home mom. I always wanted to be a working mom. My career was very important to me. I wanted to get up into interventional radiology. I had my own goals. And to circle back to your previous question of like how my life has changed, it turned upside down to the fact of I am now a stay-at-home mom without a choice. But and that's okay. For us who have kids that are disabled, it's an extra layer. It's an extra layer of appointments. It's an extra layer of getting the kids' equipment right, talking to the schools, talking to the doctors, talking to the therapist. For me, I am ADHD, and I went into a career that actually helped me with my ADHD. I could hyper focus on my tasks and what's going on to come back into a situation where I need to do more executive function tasks. That's extremely hard. And then the mental toll, I don't think I've ever been more exhausted in my life. I don't even have time to be trying to fight for their Medicaid. For anybody who is also in a similar situation, waivers are across the nation. They all are a little bit different because even though we're getting paid minimum wage, there is a thing, it's called IRS 2014-7. It is a federal exemption for people who are having a hardship of taking care of their family members. And what this does is it excludes you from having to pay federal tax. So even though I'm only making $17 an hour, I don't have to pay federal taxes. So I at least do get enough chunk of money to keep us up. But I hope if there's families out there who are taking care of their kids and they don't know about this IRS 2014-7, please pass that word, because I feel like it's very ironic that HR came and tell you that. So if you have a state that allows you to do in-home support services, what you do is you'll contract with another institution. Mine's called Circle of Care, and they hire you on as the caretaker. And so they're the ones who they interview you and they tell you about, you pretty much go throughout your day of your routines and what you're doing. And then they're going to compare what you're doing with your kid to the typical kid of that same age. So for Jaxon, he can't put on his shoes. He can't take his pants off. He's not potty trained. So I'm doing all of that. So they will calculate that time into hours. I don't know about other state rules, but I do know the IRS 2014-7 is federal. And so if you are getting paid by Medicaid, make sure they're not taking taxes out for the federal. You still have to pay state taxes.
So now you had to become a expert on all this medical stuff and all of these different surgeons. Now you're becoming a expert on Medicaid and even a tax expert now. And on top of that, pretty soon you're going to be an expert in advocacy, right? Because now with everything going on, I know you're dipping your toe into that a little bit because you have to, right? You don't have a choice. These are essential programs that your family needs. It is not an option. And so if they're talking about taking them away, you have to start advocating for that, right?
Yeah, it's gotta rally the troops, start fighting it. And the approach I'm taking is that I'm just, right now I'm very lucky because Jackson's seizures are uncontrollable. Seizures and walking on eggshells and that intense sort of living is not sustainable. You have no energy for anybody else in your life. You are just focused on that. Would love to get into the advocacy part for those families who cannot talk and for those kids who cannot talk. I am so lucky that Jackson's even talking. There's so much to advocate for in these areas, and the hardest part is people think that it doesn't affect them. If you're in a family and you're well, I have healthy kids, this is great. And that's how I was. Before I had kids, I was yes, kids, people with disabilities, they need help, they need support. I just didn't fully know how layered and how much it is.
Trying to figure out not only the medical system and insurance system and how to do this, but then also to have to fight to keep these programs alive is not attainable. And I think you telling your story, I think that's also very relatable. And that is a lot of people with anything advocacy or politics. It's you don't know what you don't know. And that's why I think stories like yours are so important, because people sometimes like to villainize people who are utilizing programs like this. And your situation could not be further from what they're trying to do.
One thing I'm trying to get out to people is that many of the kids that Jaxon and I have come across are kids from freak accidents. So if you don't think this is going to affect you, I sincerely hope it doesn't. But there are accidents happen all the time, and you're going to want to have a safety net. Because, people tell you you're not going to get Medicaid the first time you apply, all this stuff. And because a special needs connection helped me, I got in. And then they told me about the program of getting paid to take care of him. But because I was still working, I didn't take that. I didn't try to get more money than I needed or anything like that, because he was doing okay. He didn't need me. When he had surgery and he's paralyzed, loses strength on his whole left side of the body, that affected everything. And so that's when he really needed me. And that's when I took advantage of. And it's just such a beautiful program because the world of these kids, they're so great. Like, I think we diminish what they can do. I truly believe any kid with a disability, they have some magic power in some sort of other way, and we just have to find it. It's not for people who are lazy and don't want to work. It's for people who get hit with a really hard part of their life. I know families that had kids that were preemies and had to go get on Medicaid, and luckily they get to graduate. Like, I would love to graduate from Medicaid. I would love to graduate from therapy. I don't know if Jackson's ever going to have that. The other thing about private insurance is right now in Colorado, we have an awesome neurological and physical ability center called NAPA, and they're world renowned. And the problem you hit with the hospitals is if you're getting these therapists and your kid, it tends to be like mine, neurological disabled, there's so much more that they need to know. United Health does not pay for NAPA. Medicaid pays for NAPA. And we pay still out of pocket about $1,500 to $2,000 a session. They do intensive sessions. If Medicaid goes away, that is going to be about $11,000 per session. They are based on 3-week intensives. So anything for kids with disabilities, consistency is key. So weekly therapies are great to keep up with it, but they don't do a lot. Like in this 3-week period, Jaxon gets the ability, like he makes a year's long worth of progress because we do 5 days a week, same routines over and over and over again. And that brain needs it to make those connections. They need the repetitiveness. They need the intensity of it. And it's been like, I think our whole goal is everybody's goal who has kids, you want them to grow up and live and be good people, but like be stable on their own. And this is Jackson's biggest chance of doing that, and some of other kids' biggest chance of doing that is having these therapies at a young age. And he does not have time for another election to go by because these are the years that the brain makes these connections, and it's make it or break it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just shows all of this, how specialized every medical situation is, how unique it is. And we can't have a bunch of lawmakers who have never experienced something like this just making regulations based on where they can cut a few dollars or where they think that like maybe there's some waste happening or what they think some arbitrary number is of how many sessions you should get for XYZ when it doesn't work that way. So
yeah, that's actually a good point because with his private insurance, they won't pay for intensives because he's only allowed like 1 session a week of a certain therapy. So it's silly. And and it goes back to the fact that like this is actually keeping me in the workforce so I can go back to work. You take it away and I'm not contributing to society. That to me economically, like you need to keep that if you want these families to like survive.
Yeah, you take it away and you fall through the cracks like so many others who unfortunately do. And not only does that not help you or your family, but it doesn't help our economy and our society. And it really is true, like a rising tide lifts all boats. The more we can really help people in their times of need and give them support so they can get back on their feet, it's going to help everybody out. So I appreciate you so much coming on here today and telling your story. I think this is going to be so important for so many people to hear. I'm so glad to know you, and Jaxon and Hadley are so lucky that you are their mom. You are just, I think moms could run the world in general, but like special needs medical moms could run the universe. I mean, let's get you guys in positions of power because I'm sure you could get everything turned around here real quick.
I know a lot about Medicaid in this moment right now, and so if anybody needs that help, I can help you.
Okay. Well, if anybody wants to get in touch with Morgan, I'll put this in the show notes, but send an email to me at hello@motherhoodforgood.com. If you send me a note, I will get you in touch with Morgan, and she'll just keep working her magic. And by the way, you don't have to be on the Hill lobbying to make a difference and advocate. Just like you're doing, talking to other parents, helping other people out, sharing the knowledge you have, that's how we get change done too. So thank you for everything you do, and thank you for sharing your story here.
Thank you so much.